Welcome to Sonic Bytes, the freewheeling conversation and interview series for the eclectic music lover. This week, we're excited to welcome our fourth musical guest on the podcast, Adam Haddour.
Was it love? I guess I'll never know. My mind keeps thinking, my head keeps spinning, and in the end I had to let it go.
Adam is a singer and songwriter born and raised and now performing in London and across the UK. A regular feature in both bands and musicals throughout his time at school, Adam started writing his own music while at university. We first met Adam as part of UCL's famous Live Music Society as he released his first single, As I, in 2018. And were lucky enough to be invited to play on the bill for the launch of his debut EP, The Unknown, a year later. His iconic voice, combined with uniquely insightful lyrics, powerful choruses, and memorable refrains, had us hooked immediately, and once he started playing with his live band of Charlie Zhu, Charlie Rolfe, Spencer Charlton and Louis Shaw, we became even bigger fans. In this episode, we discuss Adam's latest release, Was It Love, as well as his songwriting process, life on the London music scene, writing solo versus writing with a band, music promotion and release strategy, and much, much more. As always, if you're enjoying the podcast, follow us on Spotify, Apple or Stitcher, or subscribe to us on YouTube, as it really helps support the show and allows us to make even more freewheeling content. We hope you enjoy it. Don't clap at the same time, so just one at a time. Who's going first? Oh. No, I've clapped. Oh, incredible.
Did we clap at the same time, Adam? Shit. Right, okay. There we go.
I feel like all of our conversations always start that way. It just comes out of a clap and it's us just like reeling from the clap.
Yeah.
I'll just give you a nice strong clap. So yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
There we go.
That's got it there. You can see like, oh, now I'm clapping more than once, but
yeah. That's the most claps and most applause we've received since March, probably, right?
Yeah.
All of the two slow claps. Anyway,
thanks so much for coming on the show, man. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk through you guys, all things music related, and yeah, I've enjoyed watching the show, so I'm excited to be on it.
Yeah, I mean, we should probably introduce you if you hadn't been listening for the first 2 minutes so far. But I've tried to write out a description of you, and I think you are Adam Haddour, singer, songwriter, actor.
Yeah.
Is there anything we're missing here? Banger creator?
That
needs to be on there.
Actor, yeah.
That's a proper occupation.
At one time, I was a vlogger, but that died as quickly as it took off.
I watched every single one of your vlogs, and I was unbelievably entertained by all of them. They were so good. The Thorpe Park one was like absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
How old were you there? Was that not to be disclosed?
Oh man, no, I was 18. I was a sentient being. I was fully in control of my life and my content. Yeah. I thought it was a good idea, and it actually, looking back on them, I think they were.
Mate, I felt like I was in Thorpe Park with you. It was that like realistic.
Oh yeah. I mean, well, this was all pre-lockdown when everything was buzzing, like I could give you the immersive experience. Now it would be like a ghost town.
It would be a bit strange, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Though I guess less queues on the bright side.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, actually, no, I saw, I think one of my friends was at Thorpe Park and I saw that they put up like a story and it actually, surprisingly, it looked as busy as normal. So I'm not too sure about that. Weird one, I suppose.
I wonder if it's just like a British thing to just naturally gravitate towards like being in a queue. Like even in a lockdown when you're not supposed to be out, like somehow we'll find a way to make a queue out of it. Like,
oh yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah. Cool. So I don't think I've ever actually gotten a chance to ask you because we have sort of quite a similar, like crossover friend groups. But in terms of like you as a musician, was that I mean, I don't think you play any instruments, or maybe you do, and I don't, or maybe you prefer to focus on the singing. But I'm just wondering if you were a musician first, were you an actor first, or was that sort of it just all came together in this creative, outlet?
I mean, I kind of like as a kid and like growing up as like a teenager all through my teen years, I tried to be like as creative as possible. So I tried to take part in, every activity I possibly could. I did like I took part in like lots of sports, and I took part in lots of the arts. And in entering my high school, I got a singing award. So it sounds more prestigious than it was. Essentially, it was just something that allowed me to have lessons that were paid for by the school. Sure. So, from year 7 onwards, I was like classically trained in like, singing lessons. I did trombone lessons for like a term. And then, a little rogue That's instrument. But yeah, no, whilst I was at that school, they had like a really, really, really good performing arts scene. So I took part in like the yearly musical. I pursued drama as far as I could. I took it as a GCSE. I tried to take part in all of the plays. I directed a couple of plays myself. I was part of like a Saturday drama school for a large chunk of like my time at secondary school. So I think it very much came as a package. But if I had to say one came first, it would definitely be the singing and the music. In terms of like playing other instruments, I play the piano, but mostly for songwriting purposes. So like I took lessons, I pursued it, but it wasn't something that like it's not something that I ever played to perform. I was never like, I'm going to sit down and play a piano piece in front of everyone. It was more something that when I'm alone, I like sitting down at the piano, playing through some stuff. And it's really helpful for writing because I have like a MIDI keyboard and all of that stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, I guess if you're a singer, that just opens up a few doors. Like you can go into songwriting. You can go. I mean, I've seen you in musical theatre productions, and obviously I know you from uni, and we had the society for music together. But yeah, I was just kind of interested to know. But was there any point where you was it just a conscious thing to become a musician or actor, or was that just something that just came naturally? If you get what I mean. I think like throughout my life, wanted to like go off, be like, I'm going to pursue acting.
like a light bulb moment where it's sort of like, this is what I want.
Every day. Like I think I was quite naive in the sense that I assumed that if I just pursued as many things as possible, eventually like it would become clear like which road I really, really, really wanted to go down. So for as long as possible, I tried to pursue like music, acting, and that's why I enjoyed musical theatre so much, because that was very much something where I could like merge the two passions. Because I was like, this is a space where I can, I can like improve my singing a lot. Because you do improve your singing a lot being in like part of an ensemble, especially at uni. Like it just improves like your sight reading. It like improves like for me, I found it improved like my harmony and a lot more in that sense. But like it allows you to sort of like channel like the creative acting side. You get to channel another character. And so like when I was in university, I was very much like, like I've got musical theatre and I've got live music, and eventually one of these is going to sort of like one of these passions is going to sort of like fade away, and I'll be left with the other one, and it will become really apparent which one like I really, really love. But now I just found that the more I did it, the stronger my passion was, and it was never something where I was like, light bulb, like I really, really want to pursue this. It was just more like. It was more like, the more I do it, the more I love it, and the more I immerse myself in it, I feel like naturally the more you do it, the better you get. And the better I got, I was like, oh yeah, the more I want to pursue this, you know. And once you get to like a level where you feel like you're performing well, or you're putting out music which is, quite decent, you're like, oh, okay, I feel like there is, something for me here. So yeah, I mean, the only thing I think is the reason why I tend to gravitate towards my own music a little bit more than like theatre and acting is because I find that that's something I can do on my own terms. It's something I can do like all the time or whenever I want. And it's not like as in like writing a song. Like if you've got the idea in your head, it's not really that dependent on many people. You can sit down,
Sure.
You can get out like a laptop, songwriting software, and you can go. Whereas musical theatre, there has to be something running. You have to get a role, So I think that's the thing I really, really like about like songwriting and my own music.
Yeah, it's like DIY. Yeah, it's more control over it, and it's like your thing.
Yeah.
So I was going to ask actually.
Sorry, no, you go.
Sorry. On that point, so like as a singer and obviously as a songwriter as well, at what point did you start writing your own stuff? Sort of from, so you said you started having singing lessons in year 7. Were you already writing at that point, or did it come a bit later, or?
Psychic, I was going to ask that too.
Oh, mate.
It's
the headphones is psychic link.
No, it actually came much, much later. So all through my time at school, and when I was taking my singing lessons, it was very much classically oriented. So I was very happy in I was in like a chamber choir. I was very happy in being classically trained. I was singing a lot of like German classical music. It wasn't like like the contemporary like pop music. And then about the age of 16, there was like this one band at school, and I was friends with a couple of the band members, and they had like an opening for the singer. And in my own time, like I really enjoyed like doing like pop, the more pop soul stuff. That was very much like a sound I developed myself. And I was like, yeah, sure, I'd love to be a part of it. But that was very much a cover band. We gigged around like a couple of other schools. We did a couple of like external gigs. It was like a great time, and it really got me into sort of like that realm of music. But I wasn't writing music at that time. And then I think it was well after I met you, actually, Leo. It was in my first year. I was a part of the house band which Leo was directing, and like I was really enjoying like the gigging and very much like the cover band aspect of it. But I felt like there was, I was lucky to play with some like really, really good musicians that year. Like that was where I met Spencer, who's still playing with me and writing with me in my band. That is where I met Tahir, who's a phenomenal bassist. Obviously, Leo's like obviously a man of many talents. It was also where I met Louis. And at that time, like I was getting so like immersed into the music, and I feel like I was getting into a level where like I was like, okay, maybe I want to try like writing a little bit. And my brother's birthday is in March, and for his birthday he got Logic Pro, the songwriting the songwriting software.
Yeah.
And because we're on like the same iCloud, it just one day it just appeared on my laptop. So I was like, this it's a sign. It's nothing short of a sign from the gods, right? So I loaded it up. I had like this like little mini keyboard, and I just plugged it in, and off I went. And that was
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's closer than I thought it'd be, in terms of degrees of separation of like.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously Leo didn't make you write music, but at the same time, it was around that same time that you started to, want to scratch a creative itch.
I very much feel that like, if I feel because my first year was so influential. I feel like if it was even like remotely different, I don't think I would have taken down this route. It was only because like on like a whim, I auditioned for like the house band, and then like that it really sucked me into like live music, and I was like, yeah, like this is something I'll give a go. And actually, the first song I ever wrote was The Unknown, which is actually on my EP.
On the EP.
Yeah, so
2018.
and I think that's why, like, if you listen to my music, that's why there's such like in such a short period of time, there's such a radical change in sound, because it's very it's very much like some of the stuff is like some of the first stuff I ever wrote, and like it was very like is very much like self-produced and all like not all written myself, but like a lot of it was like written by me, and then I very much entered like a different songwriting process afterwards, so like it changed my sound and my music. But yeah, no,
that's awesome. I mean, you came out of the gates flying, I guess. I mean, I mean, what made you decide that As I was the song to? Was that the first that you led with? This is the first song that dropped.
Yeah,
I feel like I do remember it. Like I remember you posting about it, and that was really exciting.
I remember it well.
Yeah.
No, that was the first song I ever released, but it wasn't the first song I ever recorded.
Sure.
So this is another like fun little anecdote, which obviously completely by chance. So that same year, before I was writing songs, I was a part of the annual like UCL showcase Rhapsody. So and I was in I had a lead in the Rag and Bone Man song Human, and that was where I met like my now like producer and sound engineer Charlie Rolfe. And
big up Charlie Rolfe.
Big up Charlie Rolfe.
Yeah, I mean that guy is absolutely integral to anything I do. I wouldn't be a fraction of the artist I am without that guy. So massive big up to Charlie. But so just like Rhapsody had just finished, and that was like chronologically that was around about the time where I just started playing around with music. And I remember, because I was writing it all on a MIDI keyboard on like the Logic preset sounds, which aren't amazing. I remember sending him over like a couple of demos of like I think it was The Unknown, Pain, as what's now called the As I Dean Street version. And I didn't really know like about his like sound engineering background. I just knew
chops.
I knew him as like quite a good guitarist. So I messaged him being like, how do these guitar parts sound? How do you think that this all sits together? And eventually like one thing led to another, and that summer I recorded in Dean Street Studios the first so I think it was the 4 songs on the EP. So that was As I Dean Street version, Pain, The Unknown, and They. And then after I recorded that, I was like, like I was talking to Charlie, and he was like, you should look to play this stuff live around London. You should try and it's a good way to like expand like an audience and get like a lot of experience. So I started I messaged this girl called Kuds, who's a really, really good pianist. And we did like a summer of like rehearsing and like playing around with stuff. And that's where like she kind of gave me like the idea to like turn As I Dean Street version, which was this big orchestral like violin, cello, like really eerie number, into like a almost like a piano ballad. Unfortunately, like she obviously got like really busy with like degree stuff. So I then went to Spencer, who obviously I met in the house band, and I was like, I've got this song. What do you think about like making it like a piano version, just so that we could play it live? Obviously, it came out in such a way that I was like, I really, really, really like this. So we went and recorded that in Charlie's closet yeah. So it's and then obviously like all of the work was done by Charlie on like the production, because he transformed it from a song that was recorded in his closet on like, you know, an air mic, you know, not like a really like professional one or anything.
Sure. I mean, it sounds great for.
It sounds amazing.
Yeah, with the limited resources, I guess.
Yeah. And then obviously that one just came out first, and then the whole EP came out. But chronologically, that one was actually after the EP was recorded.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, it's pretty much documenting your entire creative process, and I mean, the live gigs coming through. I mean, I've been to quite a few of your live gigs. And I feel like it's a cool. I feel like you can see the things almost being. I mean, they're composed before the gigs, obviously, but you can see them developing, and you can feel that you're trying stuff live, and you're trying to see if it works. You're almost like workshopping on the fly. The bare bones of the songs, and trying to see what works. I mean, even with just to skip ahead to "Was It Love," which is the new single that you got put out in lockdown. That was. I'm interested in terms of that song, which we should probably talk about a bit, just because it's just come out and it's pretty fresh, right? It's
absolutely great track, by the way. Like,
it's incredible. I've been listening to it so much.
Yeah,
like, honestly, like not even just because I need to talk to you, but like just out of the fact that it just bangs.
It's just a banger.
I just want Louis Shaw's drums, you know, like well-recorded drums in my earbuds.
Big up Louis Shaw as well, and Spencer Charlton, and Charlie Rolfe.
Yeah, Matt, on it, like when I'll quickly like give you like a little rundown on how like that stuff was like written, because as you say, big up Louis, Spencer, Charlie, and Charlie
Zhu as well.
Yeah, because they're now very much like integral to my music and my songwriting. Because
has it affected it at all, like in terms of?
Oh, massively, and I think on very much on two fronts. And Leo, I don't know if you'll find this, because I was meaning to ask you actually, because I know that you very much are, as you were saying beforehand, someone who like does a lot of solo stuff, like, you know, with your acoustic guitar, but now you're very much gigging with like the LKG band, and that's evolved into a sound in itself. But what I found for me is, on two fronts, it's changed my music. On the one hand, so my initial songwriting process was, I actually think it was quite a unique one, because as we've like established, I'm a vocalist, and like the like vocal harmony and all of that stuff comes best to me in my voice, and the way I've recorded was, rather than just like faffing about with like keys and all of that, I'd get demos down by getting up like Logic or GarageBand, and then just recording a whole track a cappella. So like I'd lay down a bass line going dum 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 dum, like, and then like I'd lay it up with like a guitar part like da 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 da, and then like gradually like you'd end up with like this whole a cappella track, and I'd find that was like the easiest way for me to map out what sits best where. And then what I'd do is I'd take the a cappella track and I'd almost transcribe it onto real instruments using the MIDI keyboard, which like obviously I found that a lot easier. So that was like how I initially would write music. And what I was doing is I was putting down like almost these like full demos of like my the vocal sounds in my head or whatever. And I try and get them like as produced as possible, because initially like the I think the end goal was like to release them like as was. So I was like, I'll try and get them as good as possible. And that's very much where like songs like The Unknown and that's very much like the place where they were born out of. But when it came time to like gig those songs, what they do is they take my vocal like demos or whatever, and in like the rehearsal room they almost like tear them apart, like in like a really creative way, in a really constructive way. They'd be like they were obviously they were all like approaching music from radically different directions. Like Spencer's very like music theory oriented. He listens to like a lot of poppier stuff and a lot of the Beatles, and he has like slightly rock influences, so obviously his mind would be driving it in that direction. And Charlie Zhu, he's like a great like percussionist and like bassist, and I didn't even know that he was like a sick guitarist as well, but he obviously but he likes like the whole like He approaches music from a very different direction to Spencer. He approaches it from more like a more atmospheric place. He almost likes like the production-y side of it, as you can see with like the solo tracks that he released. Shout out Zula, by the way.
Big up to
Zula.
Yeah. Check that out on Spotify. So he obviously, and then Charlie Rolfe would approach it from like a really sound techy perspective, and obviously he's like massively in love with like Radiohead sound, so he'd always try and do something like slightly weirder and slightly new, unique with it. And then Louis like wants to get people dancing. That's his main goal, I want to get people dancing, grooving. So I found that with the first couple of tracks that I released, like The Unknown, They, or whatever, they were too far in almost like the self-produced like darker sphere to get them into a place where like they were like really, really, really good to perform live. So I found like from my perspective, like having workshopped it, it almost transformed the way I approached my music, because I then started writing like some funkier stuff with like a almost like a band sound in mind. Like so like then that's where like tracks like Was It Love and I've got a couple of others that are like unrecorded, but there's one coming out called Confidence, which is very much like it's like a very much like a dance groove, like kind of like a bop your head kind of song. And so I found it massively affected my writing in two ways, because the first was like the whole editorial process which makes the song what it is, and the second is when I go to write like a new song or a newer song with like the whole band in mind and that whole process in mind, I find that it actually alters the kind of music that I would gravitate towards. Like I'm going less for like the like the ambient stuff and more like I'm going for like a more live sound or something that could achieve like the goal of getting people dancing and maybe like has a slightly poppier sound, but could, also be fused with like the way I approach it vocally. And I think that's why I really, really like the track Was It Love, because as you can hear in the track, like it's like it's got like 4 or 5 vocal tracks going on simultaneously, which all interlink, and I think that it kind of like outlines like the whole process, like the way I actually write my songs, which is all vocally driven. But I
mean that really, I feel like that really comes through, and actually hearing you say that and talk about how you built out those demos
makes a lot of sense.
Actually, it almost makes me want to appreciate the song even more, because you guys already have such a good chemistry as a band. I mean, excuse me if I just compliment you for like a minute here, but it's like, oh, you're a band. It's like you can really hear all those different influences coming through, but they're not like overpowering each other, like you hear it in the guitar parts, you hear it in Charlie's bass parts, which are like slightly unconventional in using, like, he's not just playing a bass groove, he's kind of trying to add more tension, and I think the tension really moves, like even with Mystery, which is the harmony of that song. That's what jumps out to me as an instrumentalist. It's like it fits with the whole mysterious vibe, I guess. To no pun intended, but and even with Was It Love, it's like all these different parts that work so well in in themselves. You know, they've come together, and that's, I feel like that's where you get the magic of the music. You know, it's like with Radiohead. You know, if you have these people are coming from different places, maybe in terms of the influences, but then all these different things come together, and that's when you have something original. You know.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, with that track especially, I think the challenge that you have is like you try and stop. You try and like find the balance of like adequately showing everyone's different inputs to the song without like busying it or like making it something which is a little bit too difficult to listen to. So I mean, yeah, I think it's come across well. But I one thing I would like to hear is, because I know Leo like approaches songwriting from, I think it's safe to say he approaches it from like a different realm that I do, because I obviously approach it from a very like I sit down, I approach it from like a vocal sphere, and I want to build like everything almost in my head with vocals and then everything. I'd like to hear how your songwriting process has been influenced the more bandy your stuff has become, because obviously you've got your an EP, Under a Blue Sky, out on Spotify. Check that out, because it's very good. But obviously that was recorded a while ago, so I'd be curious to talk about like maybe your newer stuff and your experiences with that.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
So yeah, the first, so Under a Blue Sky was recorded. I wrote all the songs when I was between 16 to 17. So they are the very old songs now, because I'm 25, so they're almost a decade old now. And I'd perform them, you know, sort of for 2 or 3 years, sort of after that, just sort of, you know, as acoustic songs. But then when we came to record them, they came about in a lot of different ways. So to begin with, was always, I had a band when I was about 15, when I think I was 15, 16 when I wrote it, called Modern Clockwork. Shout out to Jack Pauly, Fiona Archer, Tiana Murray, and Ellie Wilson, who were in the original band. And I wrote this song and we recorded it in Essex at a place called Whirlwind Studios. And so we had this kind of like, it was, the first version was very kind of Lifehouse influence, and so that was always a band song. But then Perfectly Lonely and Summertime, I had those as acoustic tracks. And like for me, the important thing, because I was always trying to build myself as a guitarist as well, was that the songs worked as sort of self-contained arrangements. So as a guitar and a vocal piece together, you could, you know, have it like, it would build to a point where, you know, you'd have the you know, for example, the crescendo at the end of the song, sort of, so that the song would go up and down like as an acoustic piece. So it wasn't sort of like, the piece wasn't wanting drums or a bass to fill out any parts that were, you know, lacking, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So for those two, they were very much sort of acoustic arrangements, and then were turned into band arrangements with some friends of mine in Medway. So they were session musicians and friends as well, which were Mike Gibbons, Jack Collier, Luke Horton, Pete Smith, and the wonderful Jack Griffiths. And Gemma Gaynor as well. And Annie Molest and Sue. So there's so many people.
Big project.
It snowballed well out of control, but it was kind of for me, sort of when I in terms of the writing side of it, I always wanted the songs to be sort of respected by the musicians who were playing them, like as I was writing them. To sort of and so when Under a Blue Sky was written, I wrote that when I was 17, 18, and I wrote that one specifically to be a band track as opposed to be the acoustic arrangement. And so all of the strings and horn parts, sort of like I wrote all of those and I sort of heard it as a full arrangement beforehand. And so I've always, in terms of like actually writing and recording, like it's always been recorded with a band. And so like in terms of the creative process, like for me, it has to work as an acoustic track first, basically, and then I'm sort of, once it works as an acoustic track in my mind, I can then share it with the band. And then I think what I was always very conscious of was having parts for each member. I'm sure you have the same thing when you write for people, sort of where you have like, you want each instrument to have its moment. So you're not just having sort of like just a bassist just playing a bass groove, you know, having an interesting bass part, having an interesting guitar part, and sort of, and so I was always really conscious of that. But I've always been quite sort of, sort of willing to not release control of it, but kind of like to accept that. So like as I play guitar and piano mostly, I play a bit of drums and a bit of bass, but like I don't. So but I can't think of things that a bassist can think of, for example, because I don't know enough about a bass. And the same with drums and piano. Like I'm an okay pianist, but like I'm not a piano player in the way that Bethany Graves is, for example, who plays in my band.
Yeah.
And so to an extent, I've sort of learned to let go a little bit, sort of to trust the people that are in the band to kind of come up with something that I can't necessarily think of myself, if that makes sense. So I know roughly what I want it to sound like, but sort of if someone, I'd rather someone come up with something that's kind of out of the realm of what I can think of, and just sort of being able to accept that and sort of, almost relinquish the fact that like so Charlie Zhu can write a better drum cut than I can because he's a drummer, and so just there are more drum elements in his head that he can pick from to then come up with the drum part. Whereas I can play very rudimentary drums, and so if I write a drum part, it'll end up sounding very rudimentary. Whereas if you so the sort of the relinquishing of control in that part of it at least is something I've had to sort of learn to deal with, and I think, I don't know if you have it, but like I always find when the other musicians are enjoying playing the songs, then like I'm sort of like at that point, then it's like, okay, now we can play it live, sort of thing. So like if we have like a drum part, that Charlie's really happy playing, and it's kind of like, okay, like now it's, to the point where he's like happy performing the song. And the same with Alex Marshall and Bethany, and you as well, Johnny. Sort of like when everyone's happy with the part, sort of they've sort of come up with themselves, and it comes out, and then does that? Sorry, it's a very long answer to what was a very short question.
It's good information to have, I guess. And I guess one thing I would pull as a similarity between the two of you as frontmen of the bands where the band name is your name, is I guess you have quite like a core band, whereas I feel like maybe some other artists that are solo artists, they're maybe the lead singer songwriter, their name's on the bill, but they draw on like a billion different people to make their project, no matter how big the budget is, whether it's like a major labor project or if it's like your little tiny indie project. But there's no right answer in terms of like what's better, but at the same time there is the pro of having that, I feel like, is having some sort of band cohesion. And I guess it takes some trust, which is just like what Leo was saying, like trusting your band members and making sure that once, if they like it, then it's probably good enough to be performed or recorded, right?
Yeah, I mean, I totally feel what Leo is saying, and it didn't take me as long to sort of like learn to like let go of the track, because obviously when I was in the room, I was very much aware that, look, I'm not a drummer, I'm not a bassist, or I'm not a guitarist, and that although I can sit down and play the piano, I'm not a live pianist. I'm not any of those things. So like, I think it was so easy for me to be like, essentially just treat the demo or whatever I give you as stimulus, or like something that more captures the vibe of the track, or like a rough like skeleton of the direction where I want this track to go, but not something that instrumentalists are restricted to, especially with drums. Oh my god, especially with with what was it, Love? I mean that drum groove is obviously it's a tip of the hat to a great Steve Gadd drum groove in 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover, which is obviously like, there's parallels between like the themes of love. But obviously that was not something that I sat down and I was like, Louis, do this. It was obviously he takes the tracks and he's like, how am I going to approach this? Where do I want to draw from? So he obviously very much like writes his parts. That amazing piece of drumming is that's all him. That's all. And I feel like having that sort of distance or the ability to give people almost like free reign over the project can allow for stuff like that. If
Was it love? I guess I'll never know. My mind keeps thinking, my head keeps spinning, and in the end I had to let it go. And I still think about you all the time. Trying to forget you is like erasing the tattoo that's on my mind. My eyes, they can't see, check the screen. And I'm wondering where it's been. I promised I wouldn't cause a scene, but it's been hard, cause it's been too damn long. And after all the times you did me wrong, I'm just trying to move on. But tell me, is that so wrong? Was it love? I guess I'll never know. My mind keeps thinking, my head keeps spinning, and in the end I have to let it go. And I still think about you all the time. Trying to forget you is like erasing the tattoo that's on my mind. And though they watch your every move, you know they don't care what you do. You feel a hole inside your chest. You try your best to forget everything you're through. And after all the times you did me wrong, I'm just trying to move on. Tell me, is that so wrong? Was it love? I guess I'll never know. My mind keeps thinking, my head keeps spinning, and in the end I had to let it go. And I still think about you all the time. Trying to forget you is like erasing the tattoo that's on my mind. And through it all, I was still there, someone to call, someone to care. Was it love? I guess I'll never know. My mind keeps thinking, my head keeps spinning, and in the end I had to let it go. And I still think about you all the time. Trying to forget you is like erasing the tattoo that's on my mind. Was it love? I guess said I wouldn't come back to you. Was it love? I guess but that's not an easy thing to do. Said that's not an easy thing to do, cause I go back and the whip drops that's on my mind.
I mean, if I had hashtag Louis Shaw on the team, you know, I'd let him run wild.
Yeah.
he just gets such a good sound, like just out of like he just hits a cymbal better than I would just hit a cymbal, you know.
The guy's amazing. That's that's a really interesting point, actually. Like in terms of sort of letting the song almost like it develops by itself in a way. And I think that's definitely something that I find really interesting, like in terms of like when writing and when sort of showing stuff to the band, sort of not necessarily having a definite idea of it, like and a lot of the times with songs, like I'll write something that I think is nice on the guitar and works like that, but then it's really interesting to see then where other people take it, and if someone has like a really strong idea of where it can go, it sort of it gives a new sort of depth to the song, and sort of having someone else put their stamp on it is, you know, because like as you said, like I wouldn't think to put a Steve Gadd influence groove over anything that I'd ever write, but if someone else does, all of a sudden you've got this whole other dimension to a song that lifts it in a way that like me personally I couldn't even think about doing.
Yeah.
I mean, it depends on who those instrumentalists are influenced by as well, you know, that you bring into the band. Like, they bring their own character to whatever they're playing, you know. I mean, some people are better at emulating than others, and they have maybe they just only play a certain way. But yeah, you just, again, it's like bringing all those people together and seeing if there's like a chemistry there, you know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, I think it draws back on the point that I was saying earlier, that like the musicians in that I work with all draw from such radically different areas of music, but which they all intersect at like a really interesting, not niche, but like they all intersect at like a really interesting sound. So like, you know, the guitar part that Charlie puts down is like way more like rock influenced than I initially like put forward to the track. I was like, you know, like I'm hearing like wah guitar, you know, very much funk influenced, and he's preserved that in like the verses and in the choruses, but in the pre-chorus you and in entering into the final chorus, you can have like, you can hear like that little bit of distortion and almost like the rockier tone that he goes for. And it's just work when you work with people that draw from inspiration from different places. I think you cover like a broader, you just cover more ground musically, and I think it's in most cases it's very productive.
Yeah, and I think what's most interesting for me as well, as I'm pretty much a serial consumer of any type of music that's out there, no matter what the genre. And from listening to your music, I feel like I can't really, like, just as a fan, I can't really pin down exactly what your influences are, in terms of like exactly who you're drawing from. Whereas I mean, not to put you in a box, Leo, but like I can sort of slightly easier be able to create your Spotify related artist section, you know? In that sort of way. It's not a knock, it's just the way that music is.
Definitely.
And I'm curious whether you actually have any strong influence at all, or is it just like
I was going to ask that,
or are you just like an eclectic music lover, you know, as
we're about to have like a light bulb moment, like like now I see it kind of thing. Or
yeah.
So it's
Was that not? It doesn't even play on your mind at all. You know, it's like, oh, I don't need to.
No. It is something that has played on my mind, and I think this has been a conversation that increasingly I've been having a lot more, because obviously I think you guys will come to find in the release process. I've obviously, like, I've started, like, part of the process that I've really started to enjoy is after you've released and you start applying for playlists, like Spotify playlists, and obviously it's a good way of getting people, like, get like almost like generating like an organic listening, because your music's naturally being exposed to people that just wouldn't be exposed to your music. And obviously when you're in playlisting and they're asking you questions like, you know, for fans who, like, you know, for fans of, and then they're like, give like a certain artist, or like when they're like, oh, you know, which genre, and it's so specific, like it's either like pop, alternative, indie, and like I'm here like, I was like, I don't know whether, like, for an outside perspective, it's so much easier to sit down and go, that music is pop or that music is indie or whatever. But from my perspective, I sit down and I listen to the tracks that I put out, or like I listen to the music that I put out, and I'm like, with the exception of a couple, I'm like, I literally have, I'm really not sure like what specific genre this fits into, but in terms of the music like I listen to and the music that influences me, I'd say I'm like a pretty eclectic music listener. Like, obviously going to like a school in South Croydon, I was exposed to a lot of like UK rap, and that was something that like I really, really, really immersed myself into, and especially from the production side of things, because I think the stuff that I love sitting down and listening to like UK rap songs, and like listening to like the 808s or like the produced drum beats and some of the work on there, and like the really like, obviously to sit down and listen to a track, sometimes you have to have something like really catchy or something that really like draws the listener in. So I always really, really, really enjoyed listening to that, and I feel like that's something which I think seeps into my music, and I think that's why me and Louis get along quite well, because I like rap, hip hop. I really, really like that stuff. So whenever he tries to drive it in that direction, I'm like so down for it. But vocally, like I love Hosier. I love Hosier. I can't. Can't say enough good words about that man.
I've only recently come around to a lot of his stuff and really dug into some of the, because I always thought he's just sort of like a pop artist. He's got some great hits, but like he's a proper player. He's a proper songwriter, a proper guitarist. And
I just think I love like the rich, like I for me, like when I listen to a vocalist, some like, with the exception, and like it's not all the time, but like the thing I listen for the most is like the tone. And for me, like he's just got such a, it's like a mix between like, there's like an element of grit, but there at the same time it's so like clean and beautiful. So obviously, like I listen to his music. I listen to Rag and Bone Man's also another one with an absolutely spectacular voice. There's this artist that I discovered recently. So he hasn't necessarily influenced like the writing in Was It Love. He only would have maybe influenced like the slight production afterwards, like in like retrospectively. There's this artist called Son, so it's Sohn, and whilst like I don't like, he's got like this one album, I think it may be called Renan, and there's this song specifically on there that I like, which is like Proof, because it's so like it's so like vocally and harmonically like satisfying to listen to, but it also approaches it from like a really like self-produced, like a quite gritty space. And I think that's like always where like vocally like I tend to gravitate towards, like the people that have like that element of grit in it. Like I like something gritty. I like that. So yeah, I think those are a couple of artists that I
well, it's just a new genre. It's grit, you know.
Yeah. So. I mean, Louis calls what we're making now. He calls it grit pop, which I mean, grit pop. Like I wouldn't disagree. I hear it. I do hear it.
I like it, man. I mean, obviously it's a play on words, but you know.
Yeah.
He's one for a play on words, is Louis.
He loves it.
I mean, it's cool to know that. I feel like that's also something you can't, like, I mean, our listeners can also take away, I guess, is that you don't necessarily have to be influenced directly by the material instrumentation. I mean, there obviously is that influence that will directly come in, but you don't have to necessarily be influenced by something that's in the same genre as you know. If you're trying to draw a parallel between UK based rap and your music, it's not necessarily anything of the it's more like maybe a certain portion of the feeling, you know. It's maybe just the way your brain reacts to the music. And
this was one of my friends that I was acting with actually in my final year at UCL, Dan Barber. He told me something which is, it was at the time it was in reference to acting, but I think is so relevant to music. He was like, we was talking specifically about stimulus in acting. So I was like, oh, because he was playing like quite a troubled character, and he was like looking up like videos of like, people like taking drugs or whatever. And I was like, why? And he was like, oh, my acting teacher told me that in terms of stimulus, like sometimes you don't watch something with the purpose of deliberately doing it on stage. You just watch it and like absorb it, and then it all it's all subconsciously influences your performance. And I think I find the same thing with music. Like you can sit down and listen to like, one day I may listen to like UK rap or US rap, or I may listen to some R&B or country or whatever, and I don't find that like I wouldn't sit down and be like, I'm gonna write this song, but like the next time I sit down to write a song, I feel like all of the music like you've absorbed will like indirectly influence your writing and your writing process. So it's just I think that's something to take away.
That's so true, and I think that like I couldn't agree more. I always like to think of it in terms of the analogy I always use is painting. that the more colors you have on your palette, the more colors you have to paint with, and sometimes they're not even colors that you would use all that often, but as long as you have them, and in terms of music, at least, in songwriting, as long as you've listened to something, it can come out in the weirdest places. Like I have a song that I wrote called Coming Home, and that was me trying to copy Everybody Wants to Rule the World by Tears for Fears, just the original, the sort of the synth line on that, and then trying to transfer that guitar, and then it turned into something else completely different. And so but had I not listened to Tears for Fears in the first place, that never would have come about, And so you can like take just a random line or something, or just like an interesting thought or concept that you hear like completely by chance from like a random sort of UK rap artist, and that can then inform something, even if it's months or years later. Subconsciously it then is something you can then paint with. So like it's definitely worth sort of having a broad range of influences and sort of to draw on, because then it also means that a friend of mine always he used to say that like the more people you borrow from, basically the more you start sounding like yourself, because you have so many different influences, and it's that they become so nuanced in terms of the shades that you draw from. When it comes out, then it's definitely then you. It's not sort of like, oh, he's definitely trying to copy Hosier, for example, or Rag and Bone Man, because you have so many other influences in there as well, and it's such a mix and a melting pot, plus the band as well, it's bound to be this amazing original sound that people haven't necessarily heard before. I mean, like eventually the writing will go through like so many filters. Like you could sit down and like I don't know what it's like specifically like with your process, but like you can sit down and try and write like a song influenced by Tears for Fears, and then like in the back of your mind, like you've got like that wealth of like music which you've listened to from other genres, which will pull it in a slightly different direction, and then obviously you've got your own understanding of like lyrics and thoughts, and then after that whole process you'll take it to your band, like the LKG band, and that's another like almost like it's another group of people that will interpret what you've written differently, and by the end of that whole process you've got like a song which is actually completely different from the song which you were initially inspired by, which it's a beautiful thing. It's a really like so no, it's the coolest. It's definitely the coolest in terms of just like working with other people. I think that's sort of one of the biggest thrills you can have, is sort of like actually just having everyone's influences come together and then sort of converge into this sort of mutation of something that's that ends up being completely original as well, which is really, really cool. I was going to ask, so obviously in terms of your releases, you've released everything on Spotify and other streaming platforms. How have you gone about sort of releasing and everything into like what's the sort of the plan in terms of like COVID, because obviously gigging at the moment is difficult for musicians. Like playing live is tricky in terms of having venues that are restricted in terms of social distancing and keeping everyone safe. So in terms of sort of social media and stuff, because it's always something, having looked at your social media presence, I think it's something you do really, really, really well. Sort of what your social media release process and sort of just the whole social media aspect of music, which is such a big thing nowadays. Like, how is it you approach it?
Well, I mean, I think with COVID, I think by the COVID struck, and obviously like it was something which brought like the live music aspect of everything like distinctly to a halt. Like Spencer, my keyboardist, went back to Manchester, Louis went back to Portsmouth, and obviously like it's not like there were many opportunities to gig around London anyways, it's not like that was the only obstacle, like everything was closed. So I think very much my thought process was, I've recorded 3 tracks or 3 or 4 tracks, and I in this I want to make the most of the material I have. I almost want to stretch it as far as it can be, So I think the whole thought I had behind it was, I think, combined with like there were many other like factors, like, but I you know, just another little side note is I have what's called a business account on Instagram. It's, you know, it's nothing special. It's just something where you just get, you know, you link it to your email, and it gives you the added benefit of seeing like insights. And the specific insight which I found so interesting was from each post or from each story, you could see directly how many people had taken the action to go and listen to your music, or, you know, follow you or something from that specific post. And when I first looked at it, I didn't think, oh, you know, my post. I thought very much my posts are going to be things that people look at and they're like, oh, you know, cool. But, you know, I didn't think it was going to influence people. And then I was looking and I was seeing, oh, you know, like this one post has generated like, you know, 100 people to go and you know, click on the website in my bio, which is obviously my Spotify. So I was like, oh wow, like this stuff actually is as important to the whole release process if you want to maximize like your listeners and everything. And so, you know, I'd made mistakes not mistakes. I'd learnt from the whole first EP release and then the mystery release. I'd learned like how exactly the timeline of everything worked, and I was like, this time, you know, I think Was It Love is by far like the best track that I've put out, and it's something that I want to do it justice. I'm not under the illusion that I'm going to release it and then, you know, overnight it's going to get like 1 million streams. But I want to at least release it and be like, oh, you know, at least I've done as much as I possibly can, or everything within my power, to make sure that the song is, you know, as listened to or as engaged with as it possibly can be. And I think it was combined with sort of like me creatively being at a little bit of a loose end in lockdown, where I was like, I'm gonna sit down and I'm gonna make like these little, you know, promotional videos. So I'd get like, I can't tell you how many I made. Like I only ended up releasing like a couple of them. You know, one example was maybe I'll release this actually just for the bands actually. But I got the video of SpongeBob performing at the Super Bowl. And I got the footage and I edited it all, chopped it up, got Squidward like fainting, you know, you know, like Patrick on the drums, and I edited it as if they were playing Was It Love. And eventually, like, it started off being like something that I was like, oh, this is fun, this is jokes. And then I was like looking at a couple of artists like Lil Nas X, and I was like, actually, this stuff is actually quite like, it's easily accessible, and it's a good way to get people to listen to your music in not really a serious capacity. You know, people can sit down, like engage or interact with like a meme, like pretty easily, and you know, it will just make people smile. So I was like, you know, I'm gonna release it with enough time so that I can so that I can release on Instagram, on Facebook, so, you know, create these videos, release them with like, you know, fun little like captions or whatever, you know, couple them with like a picture or something, so that people are like, you know, don't take it too seriously, but just like also so just as something that can function, so that if anyone is interested in the track, or like, you know, or like it catches their ear or anything, they can be like, oh, what's this about? You know, like I'll check it out. Or, you know, I'll give them a follow on Spotify or whatever. And yeah, it seemed to be something that's actually worked quite well. So I think it's definitely important to invest a little. I mean, when I say invest in like your promotion, I don't mean like
dollars.
Treat yourself. I don't mean like money. You know, it's all it can take is, you know, sometimes, you know, just a creative screen recording of a dance you find funny or something, or you know, or a video that you like, or it's something that people will take to. Like I used the Ross and the Monkey one from Friends,
Which is
and, you know, iMovie, and then
No,
yeah,
I was gonna
I
say
think
that's just such like I feel like that was such a genius touch to your build up campaign. I feel like it's almost to the point I was just like, damn it, like I should have thought of that. You know, it was like such a, I mean, it's not an original idea to put your music to a meme, but like the way you did it was like, wow, damn, if I do that now, that's Adam's trick.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I would look. I mean, I'm not
surface
the
level.
I'm not the first artist to do it, and I won't be the last. I'd encourage anyone to sort of, you know, there are so many ways you can do it, but like, it's just those little, like the little touches. I think, you know, that could, if there's an opportunity to make people smile in your promotion, or like just do a little something so that it's not people logging onto Instagram, scrolling and seeing 5 separate people going, check out my track, and then being like, yeah, you know. But yeah, no, honestly, the great thing about memes and meme culture is every month or every couple of weeks there'll be a new one. There'll be
keeps refreshing.
Yeah.
Keeps going.
Yeah, so it's not something where, like, you know, like I it's not material that I could ever like exhaust. It's something that, like, you know, by the time that there's, you know, by the time you guys release something, or by the time, you know, Shader releases something or whatever, there'll probably be a whole new, like, there'll be a plethora
culture,
of new memes, and it's listen, if it's something that I think if that anyone enjoys, or like, you know, if you have the opportunity to promote your music and put a smile on someone's face, do it. You know, don't be put off by the fact that, you know, someone else has done it before. You know,
I mean, people sometimes build their whole careers just by being funny, even though their music is super serious. Like I've quickly drawn to like Phoebe Bridgers on Twitter. I know you're a Twitter user as well, and it's like, they're just like the whole time they're just shitposting, you know. And but it somehow it supports their music and makes fans engage with their music and stuff.
I mean, you have there are so many. I think that's the thing. Like, when there are so many artists that have like their main selling point is like their personality, or like, you know, it's not that the music is a side note, but I think the reason why people are invested in their music is because they're more invested in the person. So I think a really, really, really good example of that is Lil Nas X.
Yeah, totally.
He's
funny.
He is so funny, and he's unapologetically himself. And I think for that reason, like, he can put out, I'm not going to slander his music. I like and listen to his stuff. You know, I'll shamelessly listen to Old Town Road again and again and again. But no, as in, like, I think like the reason why his music is so easy to like is because people really, really want to like it, because they already like the personality, and they see that he doesn't take himself too seriously and whatever. And I think it's a lot easier to get behind artists who, you know, show themselves as people first or whatever. If that,
No, I think that's completely true, and it's definitely something that that I think that you do really, really well. Just like every obviously knowing you personally, everything that I see of you on social media, which is obviously the only thing I see of you except this Zoom call, because obviously we haven't seen each other for a while now. But it's really nice because it's so authentic, and it really gives off the fact that there's nothing that I see that's kind of like, oh, that's not Adam, or like whatever it is you do, there's your personality kind of oozes through it, and it's infection. It's really, really, like, I can't help but, you know, root for you as a result of it. So everything that comes out is kind of like, you know, like it's so nice to be able to support it, because everything is so you, you know, and it's just I think it's a really, really nice way to bring out music.
Just kind of just one more, right? I mean, I guess it just leads on to, I mean, just to wrap up, like what's next on the horizon? You've got more songs on the pipeline and stuff you haven't recorded. Is that something we can look forward to, or?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the session where we recorded Was It Love, we recorded one other track, which is like, you know, will be the next one to be released. It's called Confidence. That's very much the inspiration behind that song actually was I think like Louis especially, he finds it so easy to, you know, grill me and roast me and everything. And the one thing he was always saying, especially after I released As I, was, all the music we're playing is like really sad, and you know, nobody wants to dance and cry, and As I is just a bit miserable. And I was like, okay, fine. So and I was like, fine, I'm gonna write a song specifically about someone who's confident, and hopefully that will try and completely, you know, tap into a new like spectrum of emotion. So that's a track that I'm really, 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 really excited to release. I think it's quite funky. It's quite like danceable, and it's very much from a place of like, I'm confident, or maybe too confident or whatever. And then I've got another track called Symphony, and we've recorded like 2 different versions of that. So there's a band version, which obviously will actually require like work in the post-production phase, and obviously we need to record like guitar parts for that and stuff. And then we've got like something which was a little bit more self-produced, but I think the self-produced version has actually come out like really well. And there's now, if people don't know about it, you should get the BBC Symphony Orchestra string patch.
Yes,
that's
the
one. You know,
that's so true.
It's available for free. You have to fill out a questionnaire, and all of a sudden you've got BBC Symphony Orchestra strings sitting there. So me and Charlie Rolfe have been playing around with that patch, and you know, like the sounds that have been coming out of it have been like really like pretty. So I think that's something that I'll look to release sometime soon. And then whenever possible, I'm always trying to get into the studio, record, so yeah.
That's exciting, man. Yeah, I mean, best of luck to all that. I mean, and enjoy.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it must be so nice to have Was It Love out in the world. And,
I mean, if you haven't listened to it already, go
check it out.
Give it a listen. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, it's something that I'm delighted to have released. It's a project that I'd anticipated. Like the anticipation was growing, because like it was something. There was quite a gap between when we recorded it and when we released it. So like once we got to releasing it, I was like, yes, So
nice.
Give it a listen.
Yeah, I hope this podcast is a nice companion to it as well. If you're wanting to find out more about the man behind Adam Haddour.
The man behind, yeah.
If that makes any sense at all, that doesn't make sense.
Well, I mean, yeah. I hope my ramblings and tangents have proved somewhat interesting.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on, man.
Thank you for having me.
Anytime.
Got to do this again sometime.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Sonic Bytes. If you liked what you heard, drop us a like or follow us on Spotify, Anchor FM, or wherever you get your podcasts, or drop us a comment on YouTube at Leo Kelly G Music, Instagram at Sonic Bytes, or Twitter at Sonic Bytes Pod. More episodes coming very soon. Stay tuned.